Hello, everybody. Welcome once again back to Up at Noon Live. I'm Max Scoville. This is Brian Altano.
Hey.
And this is our special guest, Terry Boulanger.
Hello, yeah.
Am I saying that right?
Yeah, that was pretty good.
Thank you. I work on my pronunciation.
He's French, you know that?
I'm a little bit French.
His name's actually Julien.
Un poquito. Anyway, Up at Noon is a nonsense variety show we do every week on IGN.com, on Twitch, on Roku, on Apple TV, on Xbox One, and PS4. Anything where you can get an app that says IGN, you can probably watch us for an hour a week. Do our nonsense. Normally we talk about the news, but it's the middle of August, so there is none. So we're going to talk to Terry about his game, The Messenger.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, The Messenger.
Thank you so much for coming, by the way. The Messenger is
yeah.
something I've been tracking for most of the year. So you originally announced this game in January, and I think people were kind of like, oh, that's cool. But then there was the Nindies event a couple months later.
Right.
And I went there here in San Francisco, played a bunch of stuff. It was right after a Nintendo Direct focused entirely on independent Nintendo games, basically.
Yeah.
And I saw The Messenger, and I immediately walked away being ridiculously excited for it, because I was like, this is a combination of a lot of the genres that I grew up playing, but B, just a really fun, badass action game. So I guess explain to our audience, what is The Messenger and why should they care?
Well, so the main thing we often mention about The Messenger is that it's all about subverting players' expectations, right? So it starts off as just this ninja that lives in a cursed world, and you have to carry a scroll across it, to the top of the highest mountain. Otherwise, the clan will die, And so the idea is to how simple and cliched can the premise be, right? And then that sets the stage for how far we will eventually go, right? The delta between the starting and ending point being like the breadth of the experience, if that makes sense, And so it starts off as this linear action platformer. You go one level onto the next. Technically not an RPG, but still a light layer of like buying a few upgrades. Upgrading your character, getting a few upgrades that impact how you can navigate in the level. You get a wingsuit to glide, things like that. And eventually you're sent not when but when the messenger is needed, which is the future. So the game goes into 16-bit. And then you have the past and future world, which are both 8 and 16-bit, and then the frame falls completely. It becomes a Metroidvania.
There's the hook.
That's where this game gets completely insane to me, because it's like, okay, I'll be completely frank with you. I've been covering Nintendo stuff for a long time here at IGN. One of the biggest things that happens in between the big AAA releases and AA releases on the Switch and Wii U and 3DS is that there are dozens and dozens of 8 or 16-bit indie Metroidvania games. And I love them, I adore them, I'm literally wearing a Metroid shirt, that's my jam. But for a lot of people, they're just kind of like, another one? What's the hook? And then I saw your game and I was like, you can time travel between 8 and 16-bit. Like, how the hell did you do that?
You mean from a technical standpoint, doing the both world? Oh, so we work in Unity, which is an engine we've been working with, for over 7 years now. So all the tech that we built around it, using a few plugins and just making the tools, to make the levels and everything. We essentially have a Mario Maker, which is like just paint tiles and the grass goes on top. You can paint an enemy and the sounds play. It behaves and all of that. And then it just became this quick iteration of trying ideas, and then everything is built in components where everything has both renditions, So every level is in both 8 and 16-bit in the game.
And so
it's like that from the get-go.
You're going to swap sort of between these two worlds back and forth?
Yeah.
So there's almost like kind of an Ikaruga type of thing?
It's, Okay. Well, so it happens in real time by walking through tears or like opening portals and things like that. And we can even do shapes. So you can have like a magic firefly that carries a circle that's inverting the time period, and you can see your character being drawn like at the seam. If you just have like an arm protruding, it'll be an 8-bit, but the rest of your body. And
so what I love about this is that, like, I don't know, I used to think as a kid that like back in the day everything was black and white.
You're right.
Like literally, because that's what movies looked like back then. But in your world, things were 8-bit, and then time went on and they became 16-bit. Like trees got more bits. But the cool thing that adds to the sort of gameplay mechanics of this presentation is that in the 8-bit era of The Messenger, a tree maybe might not have grown yet, or maybe it was there. But in the 16-bit era, it did. And now you have this thing that fundamentally changes the way you traverse a level, because you'll swap between those two worlds, and all of a sudden the tree's bigger and there's branches and you can climb it, or a wall crumbled because it deteriorated. So how did all of that come together? Like, how did you basically say, like, where do you draw the line and say, like, this is what was here, this is what was there? I mean, there's a lot of like very incidental storytelling going on.
Oh yeah. So the first thing we did was just to find the fun, but like per screen, right? Because there's kind of like a scope to everything. It's like, oh, this screen is fun, and then this level, and then this string of levels, or up to the next checkpoint, and all of that.
Right.
And we looked at all the different scopes, and we just iterated forever. Everything has been redone like dozens and dozens of times. until eventually it all came together. The idea was that you build your Metroidvania first, and then we just cut out a linear portion of it, and then that's like the first quest, if you will, of the game before the initial transition to 16-bit. You know, and then that's this idea of like you go back and you revisit every level, and then we have little signs in the layout, you know, that you can tell, oh, this would probably change if I switch to the other world. You
little
know?
Visual cues.
Yeah.
Now, we've seen a lot of people who, like, the term 8-bit is often applied to just sort of pixel art as a whole, and you see people who are like, oh, I like chiptunes, even if they're, you know, they take some liberties with sort of the source material. But you guys are being very faithful to sort of the tenets of 8 and 16-bit, respectively, all the way down to the music. Can you talk a little bit about the soundtrack for the game?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. so Rainbow Dragon Eyes, he's working in the Family Tracker for so technically, like, he can export the music as an NES ROM, you know. And sometimes he does just because he can, yeah. And so, but he is using VRC6 though, so it's adding 4 more channels. Hope he can correct me.
So what that means though is that this is like canonically music that would be able to run on an NES or Super NES, which is, I think, and then the 16-bit soundtrack he's using Defil Mask. So now he's playing with the Sega Genesis library. Because the SNES was all samples, right? So you had to make all your samples. So it wasn't like an instrument bank or whatever.
Right.
So, but the Genesis did have that. So that's what he.
Yeah, and in the great, you know, Sega or Genesis for Super Nintendo console wars we had back in the day, one of the big sort of tenets in the argument was music.
Yeah,
and how, you know, on the Sega Genesis, it said Sega, like it actually talked.
Yeah, but on Super NES you could play it loud.
Yeah, exactly.
You just turned it up louder. It didn't really
Sonic Grandfast, we're still beefing over this stuff. So he's creating original music in effectively the software that people would have used back then.
I don't know that they would have used them back then, but I know that it for sure it's a vertical scan lines, and it's all Xcode.
It's using the sort of the philosophy of writing music.
It's closer to programming than to composing, I would think, or it's like an in-between. He's a technical composer, you know.
Yeah, he didn't just jump in Fruity Loops and be like, make it sound old. Yeah. It's not just retro or whatever. But I feel like that kind of carries over to sort of how you're approaching this game as a whole. You might be working in Unity, but there is like a clear kind of, you know, delineation between 8 and 16-bit. And I think you see with a lot of sort of pixel art games, there's the people who kind of capture that aesthetic, but then they'll just have it sort of scale accordingly. Like, you know, they'll get sloppy with it, you know. Yeah. But yeah, you guys.
No, that was definitely a thing we had from the get-go, that it should. We called it NES that could have been, right? We wanted it to feel right. I want to be 9 years old with my cousin with my big shirt over my knees, you know, and just unwrap a new game. But the thing is, like, any purist will tell you that would not have run, right? We added 3 to 4 colors, you know, just to make it a little bit, because you want to modernize, even though it feels right.
Just pretend it's running on like an MSX2 or something. Like, you know, you like take some.
Right. But it's like if we ever lost the feel, we didn't go with the change.
While we have you, and we're talking about music, who else worked on music for the game?
Wow, so we met the game designer and music composer of the original Ninja Gaiden trilogy when we were at Bit Summit in Kyoto.
Some of the most chilling and iconic NES music of all time. Which also paired with some of the best cinematics.
So and obviously a big influence as a child, and a big, you know.
Really, I wasn't really picking that up at all. I didn't.
And so, you know, and we met, and it was a very special moment, you know, because you're like, will they think we're ripping off their thing, or will they accept it? Will they recognize it? And then they wanted to take a picture with us.
Oh, that's awesome.
They were really honored. They're like, we feel the love. Thank you for doing this. We support you. And then I went to cry in the restroom for 15 minutes because it was just too much. I mean, you can't meet your heroes like this and have them love what you do. I mean,
I saw when you put that picture on Twitter, and I just had this huge smile on my face, and I was like, this is why we do this we do. This is why we all work in the industry we work in, because of moments like this, where you guys can take this thing that you're making and bring it to the person who inspired the thing you're making. And they give you not only a blessing, but they're also like, let's take a happy photo together. You're like, oh my God,
well,
this is so cool.
that games have been around long enough that someone like you has grown up with classic games, and now you're making a game of your own and taking it to the people who made the thing that inspired you.
Yeah, totally. And speaking of blessing, so the composer wrote 2 music tracks, which if you pre-order the game, you get those 2 tracks, and one of them is called Succession. As in, like, you guys do it now, you know?
And so you can pre-order the game right now on PC and on Switch. Switch is absolutely where I'll be playing this game. No offense to PC, you guys are doing some good work over there. But the game's out on August 30th. If you pre-order now, you get those tracks, correct?
On Steam, for PC on Steam, because you know, it's easier on Steam to have the soundtrack as a separate thing. So 2 tracks from Keiji Yamagishi, who are available if you pre-order the game.
And so, like, just to kind of recap, this game obviously heavily inspired by NES classics like Ninja Gaiden or Gaiden. We didn't know how to say it back in the day. Ryu, no one knows to this day. But they're also, like, I found when I played this game with you that it's got a lot of sort of references and humorous nods to other kind of vintage NES games. Anything you want to, without showing too much of your hand here?
Well, for me, this thing about the humor layer to the game, kind of breaking the fourth wall, right? I guess is what you're hinting at, is that, you know, it started off as just a thing I had to write because we were going to GDC and the demo needed some writing, and I just went, that's how I can write on filter, is to kind of be silly, and it connected with everyone that played, and I was like, this makes sense, right? You think of a band like Spinal Tap, this thing of like, will kind of be funny along the way, but still make good content, and you kind of have this contract with your audience where it's like, we both know it's kind of cheesy sometimes, but now that we've had that handshake, we can like guiltlessly indulge, you know?
Yes.
So that's the goal here.
And that's a tough line to walk, because sometimes you have to make sure that the comedy isn't too contemporary, that it gets aged, and you know. But I think you guys are doing a really fantastic job with it.
We'll see how it shakes out, but we're certainly happy with it.
That's awesome. Yeah. So that's The Messenger. It's out August 30th?
30th, yeah.
Oh my God, so soon.
It's coming to person?
So soon,
yeah.
Well, Terry, thank you for coming by. And,
well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much.
It was an honor, yeah.
And good luck with the launch and everything. And I know you guys are on your press tour right now, and all of this is awesome. So, yeah, congrats. Yeah. Oh, hey, what's up? Thanks for watching our video on The Messenger, an awesome-looking indie game that we can't wait to play. Some games we can't play anymore are X-Men games. Are they dead? What happened to them? We did some investigative journalism. After that, speaking of indie games coming to Switch, we talked to legendary video game creator Suda51 about his upcoming game, but more importantly, we had him pitch a Star Wars movie where Jar Jar Binks makes love. It's filthy and gross, and you must watch this video. Up at noon every Thursday at noon Pacific time on IGN.com, YouTube, Twitch, and other websites that you might use as secondary platforms to the other ones for some bizarre reason, because you live in a place where those things are blocked, and you gotta work around them. Anything you can do. Thanks for chipping in.